This is Call with Dads, where we dive into the ups, downs, and everything in between when it comes to being a dad. Here, it's all about connecting with a community of dads who are committed to learning and leveling up as fathers. Welcome to Call with Dads. Let's talk.
All right, well, then let's just get started and see where this takes us. So,
Let's do it.
how about this? Let's start off. I like having people tell a bit about themselves. Last thing I want to do is talk too much for you because I just finished your book. I have a lot of information, a lot of questions, and honestly, I believe for me to properly introduce you, I'm going to have to read your book another time or two because of all the information in there. There was a lot. So,
Thank you.
how about you tell everyone a bit about yourself and we'll get going.
All right. I am a two-time cancer survivor that was told I wouldn't be able to have children. Children was important to me when I was 15, 16. And then 18, 19, 20, and 21, I had cancer and was told that children weren't going to be a thing for me. I was sort of, bummed about that. And then my girlfriend at the time, who became my wife, my first wife, became pregnant, and I was elated. I was ecstatic. And fatherhood has just always seemed like a gift to me. And fast forward, 12 years. Oh, well, it's 12 years now. Fast forward some time, and my son and I were starting to grow apart. And almost like a prayer being answered, we stumble onto a bookstore. We like antique books.
Right.
And we discover this old set of books on fatherhood. And I open it up, and it discusses your duty to your son, your responsibility. And I was like, this is what I'm talking about. This is what I'm excited about. This. And I take it home and I start diving into some of the books that are part of it. And my son is seeing me get excited about it. I'm excited seeing him excited about it. And so I asked him, I said, you want to give this philosophy a shot? Because previously my parenting style was more militant.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you do what I say. I don't want to hear any buts or ifs about it. I know better. You should just accept that and move on. I didn't know another way.
Right.
I now know another way that is not only different, but so much better and has so many better rewards. And we both loved it. We both have excelled. There even came a point where I had to make a decision, because he and I discussed, we're going to try this. And it came a point where these old dead men are trying to teach me, a Southern blue collar history guy, how to be a gentleman.
Right.
It came across the profanity bit, and I was like, that's stupid. I'm not going to let a bunch of old dead guys tell me how to talk. And my son, he challenged me on it. He was like, well, I thought we were going to do everything. And I was like, So I thought about that, and I wanted him to see that I was trying. I just saw that he was crushed a little bit. And it just became, after about a year of doing it, it really changed everything in my household for the better.
Right.
I mean, I was a pagan when I started picking this book up, and as you've read it, it's got God all through it. Like the blueprint is very much in there.
Yeah.
And after I started
no question
publishing them, there's no question there. After I started publishing it, I sort of had this epiphany, this realization, and it called me back to being a Christian. And I'm still new to that, almost a year. And that's been it's an interesting journey because my son takes to that too.
Well,
So yeah, that's a little bit.
Well, it sounds intriguing, and it sounds like there's a lot in this book. I mean, what the one thing like that kind of has me is like you said you wasn't going to let the old book tell you, or old people in the book tell you how to talk and such like that.
Yeah.
And I find it interesting because I like when I'm not around my son, I'll let out a cuss word, this and that, or around my daughter. But I'm very adamant about how I speak and the words I use and all of this. And I forget where I read, but it I find it funny that you say that because I go back and look at the past as what did people do with their kids? What are traditional parenting styles and traditions we can use nowadays? And I don't know if you would call me militant in the sense of how I parented, but it's okay, let's discuss this. And then if I have to repeat it, then I get kind of, all right, I've told you this 3 times. So now part of my question comes into the fact of wondering, since you were focused about, I'm going to follow this book, what was the first thing in that book that actually got you started on your path of getting in order, getting yourself and your son in better condition to follow this book? And forgive me if I'm saying this weirdly or off, but generally, what was it that gave you guys the kick in the butt with this book that said, this book is good, we can follow it, we can move forward? Because you said you and your son both picked it up, read it, and got interested in it.
I was reading it out loud, and it was more I was reading sections of it to my wife out loud. So I was reading it, and each time I read it, I was excited, and then I was reading it out loud to my wife, and my son overheard. So he was picking up on it, and after I saw he was interested, I just started every morning reading it out loud for about an hour. And after, I don't remember exactly what point it was. I know we were deep into the book though, and I think a lot of it was it, it hit me on a personal note. So it talks about anger issues, and I used to say prior to reading the book, well, prior to the journey after reading the book, that I was an angry person. I just did a really good job of taking care of it, and the book really helped me to realize that that was actually not true. That I had some shortcomings there, and it even calls out the shortcomings, why the shortcomings exist. I mean, I'd been to anger therapy, I'd read anger management books, none of it hit. All they did really was irritate me more, make me feel alone, like there was nothing that was going to be able to help me. And then some dead guys that have been dead for several decades wrote a book when they were in their early 20s and late 30s and just cut me to my core. And I don't know if my son saw that and thought, I like this, because like he was witnessing me experience some growth himself. And for a 10-year old, a 10, 11-year old, I think that must have been odd and inspiring at the same time.
All right. So, what what did you find that changing your language, getting rid of the cursing? Like I said, for me personally, I focus a lot on how I speak around my kids, the words I use. I'm very adamant so that they don't use it, and I correct them if they use bad words, what so have you. What did you find in your own life once you accepted, all right, I'm gonna follow this, like you said, your son called you out on it. So you started changing the way you spoke. Did you change it? First off, did you change it just around your family, or did you change it all across the board?
I So the way that the book presents it is it's your habits. So, and it at one point, I don't know if it's the first book or the second book, it does discuss, when a man's in pain, just like he slams his thumb in a hammer,
Mm-hmm.
profanity comes out, and they discuss it. And their position on it was that they understood why he did it, But at the same time, if a man was going to call out in pain then, and that's his instinct to let out, it more than likely indicates that it's a habit he has. So he does it not just in that instant. He does it in instances where like he's frustrated, or today it would be road rage would be a really good example in a car. That's everybody knows the experience.
Right.
So I took that to heart and immediately started removing it out of. Immediately started. Yeah, okay, that's not making sure I wasn't telling a lie there, because it took a while to remove it out of my vocabulary, and I'm still working on it. I had so many funny words to try to replace it, and ultimately it just ended up being cutting it out with the self-talk. So I stopped doing it altogether, and that was what actually ended up working the best at removing it.
All right. And what's the big takeaway, the big benefit you found from changing that?
It's I used to, as I said, I was an angry person, and I had the profanity. I'm sure you can imagine, I experienced communication issues with people because I don't like repeating myself. And so that frustrated me. I was an angry person, so it sort of multiplied that. And then I had profanity on top of it. So when I was trying to convey my point that already didn't land well, it just ended up more profanity and more anger. And my point was lost. It wouldn't matter what I was telling people. I just lost the entire essence of what I was trying to deliver to them. And so removing the profanity out, and at the same time removing some of the anger out, I've developed a much better communication skill, and I've been able to it's strange to say, I've been able to grow as a person, and my own self-talk in my head is I'm much more receptive to listening to it than I used to be.
Understand. Now, your book discusses the habits that we don't talk about, the things that we do that we know are bad or good, but we don't really discuss out in public and what so have you, if I understood it right. Like I said beforehand, your book has so much information, trying to keep everything straight of this, that. Bear with me if I get a little twisted on some of this, but with changing that and learning this habit I need to do, this I need to change this habit or cut this habit out. So that's kind of what I was leading into with these questions is what habits, once you start changing habits, once you start forming and doing things, what do you think the power of changing your habits actually lead to? Because I might have missed it when I was going through your book, but it just discussed the habits we need to focus on fixing the habits that we don't talk about.
I'm so glad you brought this up. I ended up doing a diet change, and I cut out a lot of other nasty habits right about the same time, just because this book called them out. I know that in other circles, Tom and I have discussed pornography and like how that's a nasty habit that needs to go. So all around the same time, I got rid of that habit. I got rid of a lot of unfortunate habits that I didn't even know were negative at the time. I got rid of television. I got rid of all of my social media. I stopped consuming sugar. I basically, anything that was bad for me that provided dopamine, I cut out, all within like the same 90-day period. But I didn't put anything back in that did provide dopamine. So I ended up terribly depressed. And now I will say I did go through an incredible amount of growth in that period, but I would really like to help prevent anybody from doing that. the best habit I think that the best habit I think anyone can set is the habit of improving your habits. If you set that, then everything else just sort of starts to fall in place at a much healthier rate. I traded a bunch of unhealthy habits for another unhealthy habit of just getting rid of all the bad habits.
Mm-hmm.
I'm impatient, so I wanted to do it all at once. Don't anyone listening or watching, please don't do that. It's painful.
Well, you're also setting yourself up for failure. I mean, that's a very cliche situation when it comes to New Year's resolutions, right? People will, they go from never working out in their life to deciding they're going to go to the gym 5 days a week, and that lasts a month, and then it's out the window. It'd be much better if you decided to go to the gym 1 day a week or 2 days a week, right? And then increase from there. That's a much easier goal to meet. Setting reasonable goals for yourself. Yeah. Plus, I would go ahead.
If you've never, gone to the gym, it's sort of like it's the 365 rule. If you did no push-ups last year and you did 1 push-up a day this next year, you'll have done 365 more push-ups. It's
right.
A little bit adds up a lot.
Exactly. Yeah. Inch by inch. Right.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting too, because I often feel like in many ways, moderation is significantly more difficult than abstinence. Now, there are some things that I don't think that applies to, right? Like we talked about pornography. I think abstinence is, that pornography is not something you can do in moderation. I actually, even a little bit more controversially, feel that that's not true for masturbation either. I don't think that's something you can do in moderation. But there are a lot of things that you can, right? And I think you probably should, because it's gonna be a more difficult task to accomplish than abstinence. Abstinence in some ways is the easy way out, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well,
I think I would agree with more of what you said than you may be aware of.
well, with some habits, no matter what it is, just like I've known plenty of people that have big drinking problems. And so to me, I can relate bad habits with drinking because of my back history. I've known people with the issue where, like, for me, I went 2 weeks without even a drink, and when, I just realized I haven't had a glass of wine in a couple weeks. All right. Just kind of, I can go, don't even think about it, no big deal. But I have friends that I've known that literally would sit there and go, oh, I haven't had a drink yet today.
Mm.
And it's like I had a buddy that I knew for many years, all the way up until we used to go out drinking a lot. And I never thought about it then. As we got older, him and I became roommates and all this, I started seeing that he was always drinking, always drunk, all this. And I was like, there's something wrong there. And some people, it's with like the drinking, the drugs, the addictions like that, you can't just cut it back in moderation, because that little bit of fix is going to make you want. And I think pornography, premarital sex, all these things, the urges, the feeling that you feel from these addictions and what so have you, those, I believe, are things that you can't just do in moderation. You have to cut these things out, or you're always going to want more. They're, for no better word, but drugs. They're all drugs that is dragging you back in, and they were all designed literally to hold you down once they get you in their grasp.
Mm-hmm. Well, you touched on a good point too, because it's not just about the thing, it's also about the person, right? Whereas, I've never had a problem with alcoholism. I can have a drink every couple months, once a year, right? And it's
Right.
no problem for me. Moderation is easy for me when it comes to alcohol, whereas someone who's struggled with alcohol their whole life, moderation is probably not the way you should be going, because it just might not be possible for you. And maybe in that case, yeah, abstinence is easier, and you should probably choose the easier option because it's, something that you struggle with. So yeah, it definitely depends on the person as well.
I think the more dangerous one, like you're talking about the habits we don't talk about. What about the addiction to comfort?
Mm-hmm.
I have never been described as a lazy person. And I went through a bit where I used marijuana, and my excuse was that I work really hard and this bliss was very relaxing. So while I used it more in a medicinal sense, I was also able to recognize that it did kill my drive to do more because I was comfortable. I would come home, and before bed, it was like a routine. And it got to the point that it was not every day, but every couple of days. So as soon as things got hard, well, let's make it less hard. And then it would be relaxing. It would be nice. You'd laugh, you'd giggle, you'd eat, you'd go to sleep.
Mm-hmm.
But those few hours, like we talked about a little bit, adds up.
Mm-hmm.
I quit that. I published a book. I published a second book. Like it's crazy what you can do with those few hours. Just push a little harder. The addiction to comfort, I think, plagues a lot of modern men. Because I think that goes into a lot of the other ones: alcohol, the pornography, the masturbate. Like it all adds into comfort.
Well,
Yeah, marijuana. Go ahead there.
Okay, I'll let you get on this, but the comfort thing, marijuana, yeah, that's big comfort, but I think that, like we said earlier, or like I said earlier, I look back on how things used to be and how people used to do stuff, and men didn't really focus on let's be comfortable with everything we do, right? It was, I have a job to do. Even if you were a dad that worked in the office, you would, on weekends, chop wood, you would do the hard stuff around the house, you would get things done. And your sons and your daughters would see you doing this stuff and say, all right, well, dad's working, dad does the hard stuff. I want to make sure I want somebody that's just as hardworking, is just dedicated to the family as dad is. Now you have people that, and there's nothing wrong with the job, but you have computer programmers, you have people that if you gave them a 10-pound weight, they would struggle at lifting it seems like. And like I know a guy that he's a computer programmer, and all he wants to do after he works all day is come home and play video games. And to me, like, mind you, I've stayed up and did my all-nighter gaming when I was younger and all this, but it's like I'm constantly playing with my kids. I'm doing stuff around the house. I'm making sure stuff gets done. My wife is making sure stuff gets done. Our family is showing that we work hard, we play hard, we fight for what we need to fight for, and all this stuff. We kind of set those values. Again, going back to old time, we're not hiring somebody to mow the yard. We're not hiring people to do, if we can do it ourselves, we don't hire somebody to do it. And I think that goes back to people are so addicted to comfort. Like you said, you'd come home, you'd be stressed out, you wanted just to be comfortable, so you'd smoke some weed so you could be comfortable, relax, and enjoy the evening, things like that. So do you think that men should actually try to start finding ways to do something outside their comfort zones, to break these habits, to do what's needed to be better? Because like you both were talking a little bit about the gym, a lot of people that go do workouts and things like that, even if you're doing push-ups at home, one thing I've read quite some time ago was that the benefit of working out either at a gym or at home, whatever you're doing, isn't the, yes, you're getting fit, you're getting healthier. That's one of it, but you're pushing yourself outside of your comfort zone to become something better.
I think we should strive to be doing something. I think if we recognize that doing nothing towards betterment is actually unhealthy, and that doing something towards betterment is healthy, I think we would organically get a lot farther.
It's in the fire service, and I don't know if this seems like maybe it's cross cultural throughout the fire service, but there's a phrase, and maybe it's common in other areas as well. But I had an instructor that would tell me this. He said you need to get comfortable being uncomfortable, and
It's a great saying.
I remember I had a particularly arduous day, and he said this to me, and I said, "Why?" which was an inappropriate thing, right? Because he was my superior, and but to his credit, he looked at me and he said, "Because that's where growth happens."
Oof.
And I was like, "Wow." What do you say to that? I'm like,
wow.
Okay.
That's what you say to that. Wow. Oh, okay.
Okay. All right. I get that now. Yeah. So that was kind of an eye-opening experience, but kind of touching back on the idea of like comfort throughout history and marijuana. So marijuana is kind of something that I have struggled with from the time I was young. I was introduced to it at about 13 or 14 years old. I grew up in a little farming community. It was very common. And it became a lifelong thing for me. And I even was involved in the industry at a period of time, the legal industry for a period of time, which was also not good. But what I found is that marijuana is something I really can't do in moderation. That's something I've learned, right? It's something I have to kind of just abstain from if possible. But it seems to me that maybe because there were periods of time when I was using marijuana and, I rebuilt a classic motorcycle from the ground up, right? So it's like I've had periods of time where I've really been focused and driven to accomplish things, even though I was using marijuana. But what I've noticed is I think that because of the way that our society has grown to create all these different dopamine traps for people, right? We've got things like social media and video games and the high caloric dense foods and all these different things, TV shows, and I think that marijuana, in some ways, it's much easier for you to fall into those traps. So I don't know that the issue is necessarily the marijuana. I think it's just that the society has changed in such a way that it's maybe no longer feasible, if that makes sense.
There's a line, and I get nervous saying lines. I don't know where the source came from. Something like the path to excess leads to the Tower of Wisdom. And civilization seems to dwell in excess. And for so long, we have been in excess of dopamine, so much that our baseline is actually elevated higher than it should be. That might not be natural. And by natural, I mean healthy to the organism of the human being, the animal itself. And, with all of the different things that we're discussing right now, for example, helping people gives you dopamine.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think you can really do that in excess to the point of like a video game.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think like accomplishment feels good. Like you talked about the motorcycle, like finishing that project and looking at it, that has to feel good. I built in my backyard before we sold our house. I built a canopy to go over a bridge, but I built it exclusively out of this Da Vinci ladder design and put lattice on. It was beautiful. And then it had wisteria that grew all over it. It was planned that way.
Mm-hmm.
It was a nightmare to build. Don't build that by yourself. Build that with somebody else. Take help. But it was beautiful, and I loved it. And every time I saw it, it gave me a little bit, and that made me while reading these, it made me realize that the way that old people did things, they cultivated this garden, like a butterfly garden or a bird's, this the entire thing there, this garden, and then they would sit out on their porch and they would bask in the glory of it
Mm-hmm.
because it gave them some dopamine. They were happy in that. They were joyful. And they lived better lives than we do, but we have had much more dopamine than they ever could comprehend. And we don't know what to do with it.
So I kind of want to go on the topic we are on and extend it a little bit more, because with the habits and things that we talk about, one thing that your book does touch on a bit is teaching our kids consequences by telling them what happens, then following through with that. Focusing on trying to teach our kids not to allow the dopamines to get them addicted, to avoid the traps of addictions. How do you think the consequences, or how do you think we can teach our children the consequences of these? Because an example is like my daughter right now, she just turned 3, and I have to be very stringent on any tablet time we give her, because right now at 3 years old, any tablet time, she goes into a fit and gets upset when the tablet goes away. And like my son, he's old enough I can tell him, too much of this is going to rot your brain. You won't think, you won't go outside, you won't do this, you won't do this. He understands that well enough. My daughter, I have to go another route because, again, she's only 3 years old. So teaching her the consequences is going to be a longer process because of where she is. But where do you find in either your research, in your own life, what so have you, that how we should look at teaching our kids the consequences to avoid these negative habits and what addictions?
That is a very good question, incredibly complex. I'm going to try. The tablet one is interesting. My own son, after we'd been doing I'm going to tell on him a little bit. After we'd been doing FSL, the father-son library, that's what my household calls it for short. We'd been doing it for a while. My son was, exhausted, and you really end up placing an emphasis on trust when they're older. A 3-year-old I'll work my way back around. He's 12, and since we moved into the new house, his sleep schedule was different. And he just never seemed to recover from that. He was always tired. And I thought maybe it's because he's 12. It's about the time you start getting really tired. I know when I was a teenager at that age, I slept a lot.
Right.
I was also staying up late, but I slept a lot.
Right.
And I was exhausted one day, and I went to bed early. And it was like 9:30, 10 o'clock. I woke up and thought, okay, let me go. Now I'm awake and it's dark. I haven't done I haven't gone around and checked all the windows and the doors. So I got up to go check the doors, and the front door was unlocked. Well, I normally call my son in the evening, and I was like, oh man, is he still outside somewhere? So before I locked the door, I went to his room to go check on him, and I opened up the door real quiet because maybe he's asleep. I didn't want to wake him up.
Right.
And peeked the door open a little bit, and he wasn't in his bed. But sometimes on the other side of his bed, he hides. Sometimes he falls off in the middle of the night and goes to sleep. Sometimes he's there just to read a book. It's like a comfort spot, I guess. So I go to the edge of the bed, and very quietly I look over, and he's hunched over with the blanket over him. That's what it looks like. That's what I can see. And I thought, oh, okay. And then I see a little bit of movement, and we've already talked about this at least once or twice in this conversation. I didn't know with the amount of movement that was going on what I was about to discover, and I was like, oh, can I just leave? Can I just like what do I do? And I'm not really awake, but I'm waking up very quickly. And about like he pulls the cover off and he looks this way, but I'm standing over here. And he looks at the door and doesn't see anything. And he comes back around and like, the cover fell off. And my worst fears were not what was happening. So that was a bit of a relief. But what he was doing was he was on his tablet. And then when he turned back around and fixed himself, it's like he saw me standing there now. And he looked up and he put his head down and his shoulders slumped. It's like guilt was just all over him.
Mm-hmm.
And we'd been on this FSL journey for a bit now. And this was one of the moments that really tested the boundaries of it. So I asked him, I said, what was going on there? What's going on? And he's like, I'm playing games. Now, he had been allowed to have his tablet for like an hour a day. And this is sort of something that we discussed together. Like he determined, we explained the dangers of it. We explained, the dangers that I understood them then. I've learned much more now.
Mm-hmm.
That it wasn't good for humans to consume media the way we were, and that it was even worse for kids. That's all I knew at that time. And so he elected to only do an hour a day, and he'd been playing outside. And what I didn't realize is that he had been getting up after we went to bed, getting his tablet and playing it, and then putting it back out there on the charger so he never got caught.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why he was tired. So we had a very long discussion about it, and it was the first time I'd ever used these words, and the first time I'd ever seen them have that impact on my son. I said, "I'm disappointed in you," and he was crying immediately. Like it cut him to the core. And we ended up having discussions about that, and I started doing more research, and I found out that the child brain with tablets the way they are now and video games, it's not like when we were growing up. The video game was just some fun game. They've been designed to keep the kids there longer.
Mm-hmm.
Truly like a lab-made drug just for kids to consume more and more and more. And it
outright malevolent.
Outright. Yeah, that's a good way. It's just, so we ended up removing it and then implementing some other things. And now he doesn't want anything to do with it. Like he just outright rebukes it.
Mm-hmm.
Technology. We watch a certain educational series together. I'm trying not to name drop anything. Oh, well, why not? Like, it's the Peterson Academy. We watch that together as a family.
Right.
And we take the test as a family. It's like our fun thing. It's like the one time we actually do TV. Well, it's our TV. And he won't even watch that. A lot of the times he will just put his back to it and he's looking at me and my wife while we're watching it. Because he's like, I don't want to overconsume. And that puts me in a weird spot because I'm like, man, I don't know. Like the willpower this kid is developing is impressive to me. I don't know. Like, is that a healthy thing there? What is he? I ponder that a lot. So with the 3-year-old, knowing what I know now, it does seem to make sense that she can't seem to handle any of it. And it's almost unfair, like how it's attacking the kid brain. I don't know how to explain it to a 3-year-old that it's bad, other than like just throwing it away. But then you have multiple children. I only have the one, so that becomes Like, why is one kid allowed to use it and not the other?
Mm-hmm.
I'll reflect on that, because that's abnormal for my situation. So I'll have to think
We
more on that specifically. But I think just like with my son, I explained the dangers, but he was older. A 3-year-old is very. Do you think that's where, as a parent, you have to just remove it from them? Sort of like, would you treat it like junk food? You just don't have it, so they can't consume it until they're able to comprehend
Uh,
why you don't consume it.
well, so in my house, for an example, we do like we'll do a bit of the this is what you can do. Like I try to teach my son the value of technology, and again, he's 6 years old, so I try to teach him the value of technology and using it for the better of things, so that like we homeschool, we use a online course. He does his work there, right? We also use the tablet for a international Chinese class that he takes, for a math class that he takes that's all around the world. So we use technology quite a bit in my house. Now, in doing so, these are not things that are set up to addict you to stay on these as long as you can. They're meant to, this is what you can do them, get out, do stuff. Even the online homeschooling has activities that you print up and go out and do it. My daughter, with her being 3 years old, we kind of look at it like grandma's cookies. Grandma comes and visits. She's going to have some of the cookies a little bit. She's going to eat them, and our job is to teach her, even at an early age, and this is our thought process of it. You're going to have this in your life. There's no way, especially as time progresses, if you're going to work, Tom, with you being in the fire services, I'm sure you guys even use technology to get stuff done more efficiently and what so have you. So technology is going to do nothing but grow and grow as part of our lives. So I don't want my kids thinking that they are going to be completely without it their entire lives. But it's, to me, it's like if you see your dad, like if my son and daughter saw me drinking every day till I was passed out on the floor, the likelihood is they're going to go and they're going to become adults, go to parties, drink until they pass out, do God knows what, and so on and so on, right? They see the habit in the house. Then they realize, okay, this is not what I was raised on. This is not what I'm going to do. Now, mind you, I'm well aware they're going to go out and do stuff I don't approve of as they get older, but it is what it is. But with the tablet, it's, I think, part of us as well is we need to show as parents, as fathers, as any mothers that are listening, that if you're sitting there playing on your phone the entire time you're around your kids, your kids are going to see that and go, well, I can be on technology all the time. If you pull your phone out and say, well, let's look up the answer to your question real quick. Like there's a lot of times that I'll be driving, my son will ask me a question. I'm like, buddy, I don't know. I don't have the answer. He goes, well, ask Siri. I'm like, okay. And I'll ask Siri and she'll speak it back through the car system. And then we'll have a discussion about what she said to kind of expand our thoughts and what so have you. So we focus on using technology to our benefit. We limit the things that we know are focused on keeping the kids attached to it, or keeping, even like me, when I have games I play on my phone, I'll admit it. Mind you, one of them I've been playing for like 5 years or something. But the thing about it is I play it in the evenings after the kids are to bed. As I'm getting my computer booted up, I do that. And once I get everything going, it goes off. But my kids also see me using the phone and the tablet to do classes on how to write websites better, how to learn how to code, because I know these are things I might have to teach my kids as they get older. And I want to learn it now and improve my skills so that I can teach them to be good so they can use those tools. So they see me using it for learning purposes. And we try to teach them the consequence of using the other stuff, the video games, the TVs. They're going to rot your brain. We use the phrase rot your brain intentionally. And for me, words are extremely important. The things that you say, the things you do, because when I say you rot your brain to where you're addicted to this. You just want to sit in. You don't want to go outside. You don't want to have friends. You don't want to do this. Your whole life is around this little thing and you're trapped and they own you. Now, mind you, we'll put Tuttle Twins on, or we'll put shows on the big TV where the kids will run around and be crazy, and it's just background noise. Tuttle Twins a bit different. My son's at the age he likes watching them. Then we discuss the topics of the Tuttle Twins, but generally it's focused on teaching the benefits of it, teaching that how to balance your life using it versus that. So the consequences are is if you use something too much, it becomes an addiction.
So I just have a couple thoughts on this real quick, and I have a lot of thoughts on it, but I'll try to triage. I actually I mentioned to my wife the other day when I have a 7-month-old daughter now, and I've noticed a couple times that if my phone is in my hand, even if the screen's not lit up, she'll look at the phone, like it's like grabs her attention. And I said to my wife, I was like, I wonder if in my little baby's like underdeveloped brain exploring the world, like if she sees this as like a part of me, because it's I feel like it's just constantly in our hands as adults, like every adult, it just has this phone in their hand, and it's like it's kind of terrifying to think that this is kind of like one of the first generations of children, or that's like kind of seeing this as like an implement of our an extension of our body, right? And that's terrifying because couldn't be further from the truth.
Some of the AI art and that exact thing is terrifying.
It literally tethers you, in some ways. But talking about, I have a 14-year-old as well, so it kind of like spans the gamut of children. And with her, we've restricted like technology use for her for a long time, and it was tough in the beginning. She resisted, didn't understand why. She would sneak around, just like your son did, but she's never had a smartphone. And all the children in her school, she does go to public school. My next daughter is homeschooled, but live and learn, right? So she goes to public school. She's a freshman, and just the other day, she was telling me about a girl in one of her classrooms that she was talking to that sat behind her. And she was telling me about this conversation they had and how she couldn't connect with this girl. Like she was, asking her like what her favorite book was. And the girl was just like, oh, I don't read, and like, well, how do you what about for classwork? Like, what about the books you have to read for class? Oh, I just use ChatGPT. Like it was this conversation. And my daughter was like telling me about this girl. Like she was just flabbergasted. She couldn't even imagine this girl's like existence, and I remember thinking to myself, like, all these times when I've restricted this and been unable to explain to her why, now she's experiencing it, now she's seeing the difference. It's
a bizarre thing when your child finally does see. Like my son will go play outside and some of the kids are just stuck on the phones, and he's experienced something similar to where he's like, just play. What are you talking about? You don't have to record it. Just put that down and let's go play.
Right.
I think I wanted to say, is the difference between, because I think we've all sort of touched it, but we haven't paid attention to it. It sounds like most of us are using technology as a tool instead of a source of entertainment. And I think that may be a fundamental difference, because a lot of stuff is dangerous that way. As a tool, it's beneficial, but as a source of entertainment, it leads to excess.
Right. Yeah,
So
that's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
I mean, that even expands into what I said earlier about medicinal, because it's a tool for that. But if you only use it very, very, like a doctor prescribes it sparingly, then it's a tool. But if you use it for entertainment, which I was, then it's excess.
And most people do use it for entertainment.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think about like even the way I would use something like ChatGPT. I mean, we're at an amazing point in history where, you know, we have these tools and technology available to us that our ancestors couldn't even have dreamed of. I mean, could you imagine if you know, 100 years ago, you have a pressing question. You know, how do you find the answer? Well, you've got to go to the library. You've got to, you know, search through catalogs and search through books and find that one reference, you know, or speak to people. And, you know, now I don't have to do any of that. I save, you know, potentially hundreds of hours of time, right? I just ask ChatGPT, then it gives me all the resources and cites all the sources and everything's right there available at my fingertips. Now it can easily be misused. Well, yeah. It could easily be misused, but you know, it's right. You said it's all in how you use it. Yeah,
but I mean, even like that, ChatGPT. If you set the habit and the neurons that when you need to solve a problem, you go to that. We become using that as the do-all tool.
That's true too.
And then when it's no longer there, I saw online. I didn't experience it. I don't know. I saw online on X that a bunch of people were like, "Oh, let's see what X does today with ChatGPT being down."
Mm-hmm.
Like if you're using that as your moneymaker and you don't have another skill, or you've honed that skill so well you don't know how to use the other skills, that's terrifying.
Yeah. That's a brilliant point. I think about that often too. Like I went through a period of time where my testosterone was really low, and I posted about this. And when I went to the urologist, you know, my numbers were low, very low, and they were just like, well, we can give you TRT, right, testosterone replacement therapy, which is an injection, and I was like, well, that's not the solution that I want, you know, and it was almost, I was being pushed towards that. Like that was the only option. Like there was no way to naturally raise your testosterone levels. You're just low and it is what it is. And you just take this shot and everything's fine. And I remember thinking to myself, like, well, what do I do if the world ends tomorrow? and I'm like forced to survive out there. Right. And I don't have access to any of this stuff. Am I just screwed now? Because you know, and my body's no longer able to produce any testosterone whatsoever because I've created this crutch. Right?
You know, all right. So I'm in that same boat. I'm in that exact boat. I had testicular cancer twice. First, it was lymphatic, lymph node in between my stomach and pancreas, and then the second time I lost one of my boys, and I had low T as a result. So I've been taking testosterone for years. And it came to the point when I was talking to the doctor about that exact thing. And it's like, so what happens if I don't have this? And he's like, oh, you're going to get depressed again. You're going to get, low energy. I don't think I have to list the symptoms to you. It sounds like you know.
Yeah.
It's awful. This is what's going to happen. And it's like, oh, man, I got to really hope society stays together. I really don't want to go back to that. That sounds, it's crippling.
Well, and your situation's a little different, right? Because for you, it's seemingly a medical necessity, but for a lot of people, they willingly enter into this. I mean, it's a relationship. It's like a parasitic relationship, right? They willingly enter into this relationship, knowing that there are other options, but simply because they're too lazy to pursue those other options, right?
I wonder if part of that is that they don't know that their body will get lazy, because it's part of, I'm sure, the human machine utilizes resources very efficient. Like it's amazing how efficient the human machine is. It will go, oh, I don't have to, expend resources to make any more of this because I just have an excess. This is perfect. And it uses that somewhere else. Well, if you stop, it just goes, oh, what happened? It doesn't know. It doesn't have a gauge that goes, hey, we don't have any more. Make more.
Right.
It's, we're tweaking with something we don't really have any business tweaking with. So I wonder how many of the people in situations like you've described could just exercise more and change their diet and get better sleep, what that would do for their situation.
Yeah, that's a good question. It's also very common in the fire service, as I'm sure you would imagine, TRT, because we're exposed to tons of environmental toxins, which have an effect on our, testosterone levels. We're exposed to extreme lack of sleep regularly, which also affects testosterone levels. And for most people, it's just an easy solution, but unfortunately, like we've talked about, it puts them in a position where if they were now suddenly not to have it, it would be a huge issue. Whereas before, maybe a few lifestyle changes could have resolved the issue. And that was the case for me. So some supplementation, focusing on my diet, making sure I was tracking my sleep at work, and making sure that when my sleep was not sufficient at work, I was coming home and sleeping. I wasn't coming home and getting wrapped up in whatever it was that was catching my interest. I was focusing on my health and making sure that I was making those changes, and it worked. But I don't know if that would be true for everybody. I think it's worth a shot, right? It should be so here's the piece on it. When you go to the doctor and you have low testosterone, it should absolutely be the primary course of treatment to make lifestyle changes, as opposed to prescribing TRT, because that's not only now am I being lazy, that's laziness on the doctor's part too, because it's easier for them just to give you a pill than it is to try and suggest a lifestyle change, because quite honestly, most patients won't comply, and they're jaded because they've realized that over time. It's a terrible
it's
cycle.
sad, but it's
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We were talking about habits, and you talked about like the lack of sleep. I know that a lot of firefighters, maybe it is different, but every area I've ever been, firefighters utilize nicotine or alcohol to decompress or to continue going as a tool.
Yeah.
To start with, at least, because they get lack of sleep, and then nicotine will allow you to do a little more, go a little longer. It does have its uses, but it also decreases your testosterone.
Right.
So it's sort of this compounding. What habits? What is that saying that keeps going around? The way you do anything is how you do everything.
I heard Jim Rohn say that for the first time. Yeah.
This conversation's actually great because it allows me to get to another question that I kind of had from your book. And because I was looking at my notes and I'm like, this just goes so smoothly, where your book talks about parents giving, bear with me, this might sound long again, but your book talks about parents giving over their power to schools and churches and so on and so on. Kind of like how men are giving the power to the doctors to say, tell me what to do and I'm going to do it, this and that.
Right.
Where people like me who homeschool, and we're not going to go into all my views, but I'm more of a, let me look into this before I start shoving this into my kid. And luckily we found an old school doctor who, instead of saying, well, let me just give them this medicine, we found an old school doctor, pediatrician for my kids, who will sit there and go, your kids don't need this. If their temperature gets this, if they do this, then call me. But other than that, let them be kids, let their immune systems build up so they don't have to bother me as much. I'm like, that's perfect. So
do those doctors still exist? That's impressive. You found one.
Old Asian guy. Fantastic.
Oh.
So we've gone through, you wouldn't believe the amount of pediatricians that we've looked at and dealt with that literally I'm like, just shut up and give me the information I'm asking for so I can make a decision. And this guy's like, okay, these are what they suggest. This is what I suggest. You can make your choice. Here's a prescription for what I suggest. Go home, look it up, and then get it filled if you want it. So I think with the power of people using the internet for knowledge again, people are starting to slowly drift back into researching for their own health, trying to be healthier and not giving that up. But parents giving, people in general, just giving the power over to other people. Like I said, your book mentions that parents giving their power over to the schools, giving their religious views over to the churches, and so on and so on, and down the rabbit hole we go. What's your thought about how parents can take that back? Because I personally would say homeschool and get away from all those people, but not everyone has that ability. But there is another part, like I said, this is going to be a little long, where your book also mentioned something about and maybe I misunderstood it, but where it says that it suggests public schools should teach parents how to parent.
That that particular part, they were presenting the idea that school, I mean, if that's where you go to learn things, the teachers and the parents should speak together. If there's a better way to teach something, then why wouldn't the teachers teach the parents how to do that? But they don't. It's sort of like how Common Core happened.
Right.
They just changed it, and the parents were like, "What is this?"
Mm-hmm.
I think what the book really tells you is that ultimately your child's spiritual development is ultimately the responsibility of the parent. Your child's education is ultimately the responsibility of the parent.
Yes.
Everything to do with your child is ultimately the parent's responsibility until they are an adult. And then it is ultimately now that adult's responsibility to do everything. And I think that is a very difficult thing to hear in our society that is, I don't think it's outright against taking responsibility, but it definitely doesn't want to take the responsibility. And I think that that's a multi-generational lack of actually what they're afraid of in the books 100 years ago is like, what's going to happen if parents aren't teaching this? What's going to happen? I think a lot of our positive societal effects that have been passed down are nuggets from that time period that have been passed down, whereas we've lost a lot of things. Just as an example, the why. Like, this book does a very good job of explaining why certain things are the way they need to be. Why would you, as a parent, trust another agent to do your job? Because it gives you more free time to do things. And I'm pretty sure they even addressed, like, the home didn't become the center anymore. Mm-hmm. Outside of the home, husbands wanted to go out and enjoy some leisure time because we were a civilized nation and we should be able to enjoy that. And there's a balance there somewhere. And the women were now able to go and enjoy, and they weren't stuck in the house their entire life. So they were able to enjoy some society themselves. And I don't think we've found the balance yet, even 100 years after.
Even the language we use, right? Stuck in the house. And it's just natural for us now, but it's like, that, yeah. It touches back on the idea of comfort too, right? I mean, it is uncomfortable to take full responsibility for your child's development. Now the part that they forget to tell you is that it may be uncomfortable. It's also unfathomably rewarding, mm-hmm. But you
can't explain that to anybody though. Like I don't know that you can. I've tried to explain mm-hmm. to my siblings or other people that are like, oh, I don't want to have kids because I don't want to mm-hmm. bring that into the world. Like, I don't want to have them to have the problems I have. And I understand their reasoning, but it's difficult to explain to them the benefits. Because to them, there's coming from only, I wonder sometimes if we've only got one perspective of love before we become a parent. Because as a child, you experience love on that one side. This is what love feels like, to receive. And then you have a child, and you now know what it's like to love something and give. And give. I don't know if we ever stop giving.
Yeah.
But like we end up with this both sides of it.
You know, kind of my thoughts. And again, this anything I say is my own thoughts and ramblings. But the the fact of like I homeschool my son. We were talking earlier, once my daughter gets to the point where she's ready for homeschooling, we're bringing her into homeschooling. But one thing I notice watching people is like my brother and I was public schools. We barely could stand each other growing up. We kind of talk to each other now. The only reason my brother and I have a relationship is my son's hugely into nature, and my brother is a big hunter fisher kind of person. So my wife, her and her siblings, her and her sister are very close. And there's reason behind that. But the thing that comes down to a lot of this is that my kids, I realize that homeschooling my kids, having them the way we do stuff, having everyone close, having everyone involved, and being very much one unit and showing that we're together, we're doing this together. We talk about religion together. We talk about education. My daughter will sit and she will watch my son be homeschooled and do his classes and things like that. I think taking the power, the reason we go through our lives taking in the love and the knowledge and all the things that we take in isn't meant for us just to hold it in, but it's meant for us to give it back out so that when our our time here on earth is done, we've given all we can give.
Mhm.
And that's our time to say, okay, this now mind you, there's things that happen, what so have you, that it's out of control that you leave before you can give everything you have to give. But as a whole, I think our purpose is to take to spread what our knowledge, spread our love, to grow family. And to me, I was very much anti-kids when I was in my 20s, even part of my 30s. And once my wife got pregnant the first time, it it was a shock. It was a change. I was terrified to all kingdom come. And
I think that's
it,
normal.
oh yeah, but the fact of once I had a kid, I realized how much better life was after I got through that initial adjustment of my life changing the way it did. And I think taking the power of all that I was given and giving it back to my children, it seems like I have more to give than I have felt like I've ever been given, because all I want to do is give them all I have. And for me, part of it is also knowing that they, to give them all I have to change my life. Like I told you, I've went from, I was doing a job where I was project manager at a company dealing with construction. We dealt with glass. I was busy. I was up at 4 a.m. I was doing all this stuff. And then once my son situations happened, and then before my son was ready for kindergarten, we decided that we were going to start homeschooling a year before kindergarten. And part of it is we started seeing how the public schools were and what's I have you. We didn't like it. Once I got my wife on board, I did the maneuver of, okay, we don't want public school. We know that. Let's look at private schools. Then we saw private schools weren't much better than public schools. And we decided, I got her on board with homeschooling. So I used the, let's move the needle till we get to where I want. And she got on board. I changed my job to where I work from home, and to make it happen, I made the adjustments. I work late at night till midnight or something. My sleep schedule's all out the door. But I take carotene, I think it's called, or creatine or something like that to help. It's an all natural something or other. But I'll admit after I research it, know it's good, I'm like, okay, I don't have to remember all the facts about it. I just have to know I know what I'm taking is good. So I know that's not the best thing, but
we should all share the vitamins we're using to make us more efficient. I've got a list I'll share with you guys. I would like to. You can share with me what you're doing. I'll share with you what I'm doing.
Trust me, my coffee
30
has
bottles on the counter.
There is.
So it's funny because you said something, Eric, that really struck a chord with me. And I've never really considered this, but people, you hear the cliche of well, you can't take it with you when you go. Well, that's true. But even if that weren't true, an admirable goal, right? And this is the point. This is kind of what you brought to my attention. An admirable goal is that when you die, you should have nothing left to take because you've left it all behind, right? You've given it all away, right? There's nothing left of me to take because I've given it all away. And in some ways that is like immortality, right? Maybe that's a rabbit hole, but it's just a fascinating concept, right? And I thank you for giving that to me because that's going to be something I'll contemplate at length.
The book has a very eloquent way of helping you understand certain thought processes. Just as an example, what we're talking about is, how does it put it exactly? And this might not be how it is in mine, and that's one of the unfortunates of having to annotate them. Civilization accumulates. Barbarism does not. And it draws lines in the sand like that. So it's very easy to find out what's civilized and what's barbarism. If we're accumulating wealth and knowledge and we're passing it on to our children, then we're continuing civilization. And if we're not, well, then we're still just barbarians.
Right.
That book cut me to the core more than any book I've ever read.
I'm still looking for my copy. Copies.
Oh, just get the one I've made, man.
I missed. Yeah. Well, yes. To your credit, I'm sure the annotation is amazing, but the collector in me and the book nut in me would love to have a box set on the shelf. I missed that one on eBay we talked about, and that was a travesty. But it'll come around again if it's meant to happen.
I finally found the one that was in the box set.
We talked about that
one. Oh man.
Yeah. Me and Brandon know we've talked outside of the podcast multiple times, but yeah, there was a set of the original box set that had come up, and I missed the opportunity at it. But that's okay.
There's a set of 20, and if you happen to be watching this and you find a link to the original set of 20, don't send it to Tom. Send it to me.
There may be financial compensation if you do.
There may be financial. Yeah.
Well, let's do this, gentlemen. We've been talking well over an hour, and to be honest with you, this conversation, like I said, I have a full sheet of notes that I don't think we've even got halfway through what I have written here. And these are just the notes from the book, your book, that I've read, and I know there's more in there, and we could go down a rabbit hole on any of these easily.
Hey man, look, we can do this again. I'm just saying there is a whole nother one out. I don't know.
That we can do, and that's what I was going to say is we need to figure out a time to have you back on again, because
I would love it.
This is a conversation that we can have that can go much further in more directions than what we've already gone. So let's do this. Let's say goodbye to everybody. But before we do so, how about you tell people where people can find you if they have questions, if they want to find your book, and then they can also find all the links in the show notes as well.
The easiest place right now is on X or Twitter, if you prefer, at Pondering More. I ponder more and more the more I read. The best place to find my newsletter is going to be on my homepage there, and you'll see the link. It'll say newsletter. I'll make sure you stay updated. Don't worry, I don't spam anybody. It's just once a week.
All right. Tom, for you, where do people find you if they want to tell you where those books are, or if they want to, if they have questions for you or what so have you?
Yeah, so same as Brandon, I'm primarily on X. At Earn Her Respect is my X handle. All of my musings can be found there, and also any updates to the upcoming books and the like can all be found there. So
Sounds perfect. And then Call with Dads, obviously callwithdads.com. If you're listening or watching the show, I hope you figure out how to spell the title. It shouldn't be too hard. But we also have homester.com, which is building up. It's a homeschooling platform meant to provide homeschoolers a place to either have the parents build up a career themselves by teaching what they know, having kids find courses that are going to suit them better than what they're finding in their local areas, and so on and so on. It's just getting started. We have a long way to go, but as we go, this will be the place for homeschoolers to be able to homeschool. With that being said, thank you all for being here. Thank everyone for listening. Brandon, if you can hold on, I'd be quite appreciative. This is the end
Yes,
of the
sir.
conversation for everybody else, but we're going to keep talking for a few more minutes.